You're listening to How We Got Here. I'm Christopher McClellan, and I'm joined by my favorite co-host, Christina Best. And if you like today's conversation, and why wouldn't you? Because we have Christina Best as the best co-host. Please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing our podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast.
Flattery will get you far, Chris. Flattery will get you far.
Well, I learned that from my 4 older sisters, so I have to use it with you as well. Because the truth will set you free.
I'm glad they came before me so they could groom you to know how to treat
they came way
women.
Before you. They're like in their 80s, so I'm already in trouble because they're listening.
Well, I am.
We have a special podcast today. Well, they're all special, but this one is really special.
Extra special, with an X.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's an X designation. I guess maybe because people call me X-Tina and my brain just made some sort of association between the two.
You've never said that. I didn't. You didn't mention that in season 1. X-Tina. Well, goodness.
As you said, the truth will come out. So
I will. That's what I did say that, didn't I? Would you do the honors of introducing our guest?
Sure, Chris. I'd be happy to. So today we are joined by Shane and Hannah Burcaw. They are relationship vloggers on a mission to change the way society understands disability. On their YouTube channel, Squirmy and Grubs, which has gained over 850,000 subscribers in worldwide media attention, the couple shares a hilarious and authentic examination of what it's like to be in an interabled relationship. Shane lives with a form of muscular dystrophy that requires him to use an electric wheelchair. Hannah is able-bodied and provides the majority of Shane's daily care. In addition to their work on YouTube, the couple is co-authoring a nonfiction collection of love stories that involve people with disabilities. Shane and Hannah speak across the country, from universities to elementary schools to Fortune 500 companies. And they live in Minneapolis with their fluffy golden doodle, Chloe. So Shane and Hannah, welcome to How We Got Here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. We're very excited to be here.
We're so excited.
Before we launched into the interview, I did have a special message from my friend Amy, who was actually the one who introduced me to the two of you. So if it's all right, I love to pass along her love to you guys. So Amy says, I am a huge fan and I am grateful to have come across your story. I admire your authenticity, humor, and kindness. I love learning from you and seeing you express your joy like any other couple. I will be a lifelong supporter of Shane and Hannah and hope to see your movement in breaking the stigma of interabled relationships and advocacy for a more accessible world continue to grow.
Oh, that is so. Yeah. That's amazing. We need to do this podcast more often.
I know.
Please.
Well, you have a standing invitation.
This is the first podcast where we've just been complimented from the guest.
I know, it's so nice.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're doing such wonderful work, but it does beg the question, as we do with all our guests, so Shane and Hannah, how did you both get here?
That's the question.
That's a big question, which is probably why you have a podcast about it. But the story of how we got here is an unlikely one, I think.
Definitely.
Like when we look back at kind of how we met and got to where we are today, we have to pinch ourselves often.
Yeah.
Because it should never have happened. And we never expected it to happen. We'll get into all that. But I guess we should go back and talk about like how we met. That's really, if we hadn't have met, we wouldn't be here where we are.
Yeah, so Shane and I met 5.5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a freshman in college in Minnesota, and Shane he had just graduated from college in Pennsylvania. So we were
much older, wiser, more experienced in the world.
Of course.
More worldly.
Oh, yeah, living with your parents in Pennsylvania.
In my parents' basement.
So worldly. But I saw a documentary about Shane on YouTube that one of my favorite actors had made. It was like a little mini 10-minute documentary, and it was about the nonprofit that Shane ran and the book he had written, and it linked to his blog, I think, and I like clicked over to it, and I just felt like we would get along really well. I was like, wow, this person seems, like someone that I could be friends with. And so I sent him an email, which at least for me was a really weird thing to do. to send an email to someone I didn't know. But I sent him an email and I was like, hello, saw this video, like, you know, introducing myself basically. And he responded back and we began texting and FaceTimed like the next day. And very quickly, within a couple of weeks, we were in love.
Yeah. And I remember that email vividly because at that point in my life, I got a lot of emails from strangers who had either read my work or saw that video that Hannah referenced, and so many of the emails went along the lines of, hi, you're really inspiring because you're disabled and your life must be awful, but you're still happy anyway. And I wanted to like shake those people and just be like, no, you're missing the point. Hannah didn't reference my disability. She talked about our shared interests, our shared sense of humor. Her sense of humor came through very brightly in that email, and I instantly like wanted to know more. And so in not very suave fashion, I replied at like 7 a.m. and I was like, hi.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had sent the email at like midnight. You know, I think that's why I sent it. I was done studying for finals. I was like exhausted. I thought this was like a normal thing to do. Sent him an email at like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And then he responded back at like 6 a.m. my time.
But with my phone number.
Yeah.
I wasn't just like, oh, hey, like, what's up? I was like, text
You're like, text me.
But yeah, we hit it off. And the next day, we FaceTimed for the first time.
Yeah.
And we couldn't believe like how well we got along.
Yeah.
But there was this huge elephant in the room of like, I'm in Pennsylvania, Hannah's in Minnesota. Like, what does that mean?
What's the point, basically? Yeah. What are we doing here?
And we kind of kept that up for like 2 weeks. We were like, you know, this is great, but like, what's the point? And then suddenly we were like, I think we're in love.
Yeah.
Crap.
Yeah, there was really nothing we could do. You know, like it was really inconvenient. And, you know, for the next 2 years, we were long distance. And like there was just it didn't feel like there were any options. Like it was just, we were in love and this is like what we had to do basically.
Yeah, suffer through the distance. I mean, we were very lucky that like in those 2 years, we had a lot of in-person visits that kind of kept us going.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm moving us along the timeline here so we can go back. But after 2 years, we were like, we can't handle this anymore. And that was when I moved from PA out to live with Hannah. We got an apartment together.
Yep.
And our life began.
And that was 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah, which is wild.
Yep.
So what prompted the two of you to start filming your relationship or sharing your relationship with the world?
I wish we had a better answer.
I know, our answer is so silly. We started our YouTube channel like 6 months after Shane moved to Minnesota. He had moved halfway through my junior year of college. And when summer came around, we were doing a lot of traveling. And I didn't have like a job for the summer or anything because we'd be traveling. And so we had free time and we thought it'd be fun to film our trips basically and make videos about them.
Yeah. We had no experience with vlogging or, you know, filmmaking or anything like that. Hannah took like a intro to filmmaking in college, but like it was a 101 level, like not a big hobby for either of us. But we made these videos and we put them on this channel that we ended up making, and people liked it, and they liked our, you know, our travels and, you know, the dynamic of our relationship with Hannah being my caregiver. And I think, you know, people liked that they could be educated or that they could learn about disability in a way that made it approachable and fun. So we kept making videos, and our audience grew steadily for a while. We had, what was it, like
after 6 months we had like 4,000 subscribers, which we thought was, you know, more than we ever would have.
We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then we did this fateful interview with a channel called Special Books by Special Kids. And that interview blew up in a way that we never fathomed it would. Millions and millions of views. Suddenly we had tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of followers. And
we got to 100,000 followers like a week after that interview.
Oh.
And that was kind of the moment when the whole idea of doing a YouTube changed from this silly little hobby that was like whenever we had time for it type of deal to like our life.
Yeah, and I think that was for multiple reasons. Like, one, a lot of people who had seen the interview really, liked us from the interview, went to our channel and liked our videos. So we were getting a lot of positive feedback and people being like, I love your videos, make more. So we were excited about that. But at the same time, we had a bunch of really negative comments that we had never had before. When we only had a couple thousand people watching and a couple hundred views per video, like it was all just people who were enjoying the video, supporters. Yeah. People being like, this is great. And all of a sudden people had seen our video in the algorithm, like people who had never seen us before, were coming to our video and being like, this is fake, they're lying, there's no way they're actually in a real relationship. And like, that was shocking to us. Like, we had no idea that anyone would ever think we were faking. Like, that was just unbelievable. So we had, both sides of this. And I think that's really what made us want to keep making videos, to be like, no, we're really not faking. Like, you guys really need this content because you obviously don't have a very good idea of like what's going on here.
Yeah, I think it was eye-opening, the amount of kind of ableism and ignorance that was out there. I've lived with my disability my whole life. I've been in a wheelchair since I was 2 or 3 years old. So I know that like people treat me differently when I meet them for the first time. But I didn't realize the level of like hatred that there is, or like how ignorant people can be about disability. So that was kind of when we made the decision to like have more of a message to all of our content and like to really focus on educating people along the way.
Yeah, educating and sharing real life stories goes a long way in demonstrating to people that love, care, and commitment is authentic.
Yeah, I mean, we it's always felt so normal to us, like the caregiving aspect of our relationship. And so to suddenly see tons of people being like, there is no way that she does his care, there's no way they're happy, I was like, what? Like,
and there's nothing you can say besides like, yes we do. So sharing our story and trying to reach people was our big motivator behind that.
Well, you've introduced me to a new word, and I'd like to kind of expound on that just a little bit, as ableism. I as I read through that and then just listened to the two of you talk about that, I grasp it, but I'd like to hear exactly from the two of you what does ableism mean to the two of you?
Yeah, it's another really big question. Do you know?
Yeah, I think
I have my philosophy cap on today. I don't know why.
That's a great question. Shane and I definitely have different perspectives on ableism because he is disabled and has always been disabled growing up. And so when we met, he had all these experiences. And on our first date, we were sitting in a diner and having a wonderful time. And all of a sudden, a woman sitting at another table got up and came over to the table. And she was sort of behind Shane, so he didn't see her. And she put one hand on his shoulder and one on his head and began to pray, like really, really loudly. Like, I cannot emphasize how loud this prayer was. Like, it was screaming, like yelling, to God. Like, God, please heal this boy. Like, help him have a happier life. Like, all this really terrible stuff. And Shane was like, excuse me, I have a happy life. And she said, oh, that's not what I meant. And Shane was like, yes, it is. And so this woman was like, okay, and left. And I thought in that moment that we had just found the world's weirdest person. I was like, that is a once in a lifetime thing that has just happened. Like, I cannot believe that this just happened to us. And Shane was like, no, that happens all the time. And, and he was right. Like, from other, going forward on other dates, this would always happen. People would pray, or, the hostess would ask, where do you want to put him, when we would walk into the restaurant? Like all these things where people were not treating Shane in, a normal way.
Yeah.
And by dating Shane, that was when I learned that ableism was a thing. Like I had just never thought about it. I just assumed like, people treat everyone the same and everywhere is accessible, and, all of a sudden I started realizing like, oh, my favorite coffee shop has a step going in, or this, this waiter is really not like making eye contact with Shane and is asking me everything he should be asking Shane. Like all these things I started noticing that I never would have picked up on before.
I think generally speaking, ableism is any kind of attitude or practice that devalues or discriminates against people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And you can see it very easily by taking a gander through our comment section, which I don't advise you to do unless you're wanting to be angry. But the root kind of cause of both the straight up hatred that we receive, but also the well-intentioned people that pray over me, it all comes from this root idea that my life is terrible because of my disability, and that therefore I am not a worthy person, or I'm in need of fixing or saving, and that leads to all the opinions, that I could never be a good husband to Hannah, and all kinds of things. Yeah.
Well, I know one thing we certainly want to dig into, being that this is a caregiving podcast, is just launching off of what you just said, Shane, about people making assumptions about the contributions you make in the relationship. So I'd love to unpack more about the caregiving piece of your relationship. Hannah, for you, for both of you, and I think I mentioned this in my email to you both as well, is that caregiving was there from day one. So I'd love to just hear your perspective on what that word meant to you, and as your relationship, continued to grow, what it's come to mean as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with the beginning and then?
Yeah.
That's over. Yeah.
I think early on, that word, I feel like I didn't like that word early on.
I don't think we used it a whole lot.
No, we didn't.
I've never used that word until we began our YouTube channel.
Exactly. We never talked about it in in this sort of way until our YouTube channel, or in interviews when people would ask that. We never really called it caregiving. So I think it's funny, 5 years ago when we weren't talking about our relationship to other people, we didn't have a term for it like that.
No, I would just be more specific. I would, we'd be texting and I'd be like, I'll be right back. My dad's going to help me use the bathroom.
Yeah.
And Hannah would be like, oh, okay. And then I'd be like, I have to lay down to use the bathroom. My dad helps me get into bed and helps me do that. Is that something you'd ever want to learn?
Yeah.
And Hannah was like, of course. I want us to be able to do things together. So I'm happy to learn that. But I was never like, all right, now let's talk about my caregiving.
Oh, you're going to be my caregiver. It was never framed like that. So that word sort of came in after. But at the beginning, on our first visit, when I flew from Minnesota to Pennsylvania, it was about 2 months after we had met online.
Which your parents were thrilled about.
Yeah, when I told them I was going to fly to Pennsylvania to meet a man that I had met online, they were concerned. But they got over it.
An older man.
An older man.
Oh, goodness.
An older man. An older man. Oh, my goodness.
So on that first visit, I was nervous to do, Shane's care or whatever to help Shane, because I had never had any experience with that before. So I didn't really know what I was doing. And Shane knew that. We had talked about that openly. And so he made a bingo board for me that had things on it like tie my shoes or,
learn how to lift me.
Yeah, learn how to lift me. But even like smaller stuff, like put my glasses on.
Yeah.
Like little things, we're on this bingo board to make it more of a game. So like I could check it off, or I could be like, okay, I have one more. I really need to like give you a bite of soup. Like, let's go get soup, I got like really into it. So that made it way more fun and, less like a scary
Less
thing.
medical.
Less medical.
So when you hit bingo, did you get a kiss?
I built up like a big prize.
Yeah.
But I cannot for the life of me remember what it was.
There was a prize. I know there was, but I don't remember what it was.
Hannah's favorite thing ever is like a dessert of any kind.
Yeah,
so
it's
it probably had something to do with that.
A lollipop.
Yeah. Piece of candy. I have learned in my lifetime that people can be uncomfortable about providing care. I mean, once you get to know them, they're happy to do it, absolutely.
Right.
But in the beginning, it can be uncomfortable. And that's something that I've gotten good at, very early on in life, like teaching or helping my peers and people around me feel comfortable lending a hand with whatever I need help with. Like, I rely on other people for pretty much every physical activity during the day. So I had to learn as a kid how to communicate that and not make people feel weird every time I needed to ask for their help. So
that's like your number one skill, is making people around you feel comfortable. Like, even when it has nothing to do with caregiving, that is definitely like Shane's superpower, is making people feel comfortable, which was helpful for me as someone who was like introverted and scared to like FaceTime the first time. Right away I could tell that we were comfortable together.
Yeah, and I think that, this is getting a little, hopefully not TMI, but like our like separation for those first 2 months built up like this strong desire to be physically close to each other.
Yeah.
So like when we got back to my house that first night, like we wanted to lay and watch a movie together, but that required that Hannah would lift me for the first time into bed.
Yeah.
But we didn't give that like 2 thoughts.
I know.
We were like, no, we want to be together.
Yeah, we're like, let's go.
So I was like, Hannah, lift me. She's like, all right. So like, we weren't really, at least I wasn't like feeling hesitant or nervous about that.
And the other thing about those 2 months was that we were very close already. Like we were very in love and like knew everything about each other. We had FaceTimed for like, the equivalent of weeks. Like it was obsessive at that point, like FaceTimed way too much, 8 hours a day when we could, like
to the point where our families were like, hey, do we need to have an intervention?
Yeah. They were like, let's take it easy. So we were like very emotionally connected, which helped. Like it wasn't as if on our first date when we didn't know each other, I was also lifting you into bed, which helped. So we already knew each other.
So I'm going to ask a question to you, Hannah. I'll be the interviewer.
Okay.
So we had 2 years of long distance before we moved in together, and that was when you became my full-time caregiver. Like, did you feel like the learning was gradual over that? Like basically by the end of those 2 years, did you feel like I can do his daily care, like you said?
Yeah, I feel like I knew after like the first visit, like there wasn't stuff that we really saved.
That's true. People think that it's a lot more involved than it really is.
Yeah. Like we took our first overnight trip together, like what, 5 months
Doesn't matter. Shortly,
a couple months after like that first visit, I don't know, on like my third visit or something. I think by then, like I had learned everything.
Yeah.
And then, 2 years later, we were obviously ready to live together. So I think, very quickly, I felt like that part of the relationship wasn't something that I was like, oh, I hope I can handle, like, moving in together.
And I essentially need help, like getting out of bed and getting ready in the morning. And then I'm pretty independent, whatever that means. During the day, like once I'm set up on my computer, with the coffee and food, I'm self-sufficient. And then I need help like using the bathroom once or twice, and then getting into bed at night and showering and that stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think people think that Hannah is like attached to my hip like all day, like doing my care all day. And she really isn't. Like we're apart a decent amount.
Not anymore. We used to be. Like
before the
pandemic, when I was in college, we were apart hours and hours a day.
Yeah.
Now we're pretty much together all the time. That's a separate issue.
What was the other part of that question? I forget what we were building to.
If I may interject, I think part of what I wanted to talk about as well was, again, these harmful assumptions people make about like the balance of the relationship. Oh, right. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and, right people, if people are listening. I think it's so important.
So it's a super common misperception that our relationship is imbalanced, in that Hannah must do everything in our relationship, that she does my hair and everything in life that I can't do, or that people assume I can't do. We both agree that our relationship is 50-50, and that I handle just as much responsibility as Hannah. Maybe you should speak to that. So I'm not like bragging about all that I do.
List all the things you do. No, but it's true. Shane is much more naturally like an administrative type of person. He's great at phone calls and emails and paying bills and scheduling things, whatever. Things that I refuse to do. I don't like making phone calls. I don't like doing any of that. I'm not particularly organized. So I think our natural strong suits really complement each other, and just happen to line up with the fact that like Shane is able to do those things, and I unload the dishwasher and feed the dog and whatever other things. So in terms of like household management, it's definitely like split evenly, that we take care of different aspects of being an adult or whatever.
And I think the idea of like emotional support is one that's often overlooked, especially by the people that say that our relationship must be terrible. It's my opinion that to have a real healthy, strong relationship, each partner needs to be really emotionally supportive of the other. I can do that. Like I am good at that. I love listening. I love helping emotionally, and I'm good at it.
And that's like the entire relationship. Like that's all there is, like when you're in love with someone, that like the connection between you is what it is. So that exactly, Shane's really good at that.
And let's say I'm trying to think of a stereotypical problem that a couple would experience. Like the dishwasher breaks. Okay, it floods. Yes, I can't physically get a mop and mop up the water, but I can help Hannah laugh about it and have a good time, and not freak out. I can help figure out how to find the plumber and call the plumber and get the plumber in there.
While I'm frantically mopping up the dishwasher, you can be handling the fix.
So there are lots of ways that people can support each other that don't require muscle.
And there's all these stereotypes of like what a man in a heterosexual relationship should be. That the man should be a protector, or should if someone like breaks into the house, that Shane should be like going to investigate. Like all these things that people literally comment on our channel and be like, well, Shane can't
grab a baseball bat and
exactly
defend the house.
For that one in particular, I want everyone to know that my 400-pound metal wheelchair is a weapon, and I can protect it. Yeah?
That's true. But even if you couldn't, I'm just saying, the whole like stereotype of like that, men should be able to do this is just silly in my opinion. So
I really believe especially from my personal experience, that when you interchange caregiving and relationships, there's a deeper bond. There's these special moments that happen when in the midst of care, that sometimes wouldn't happen in a normal, if I could use that word, circumstance.
Yeah.
That some people who have not been in a care type of situation don't get.
Oh, absolutely.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the average non-disabled relationship, how often can they say that they've done poop while the other partner held them on the toilet? You know, how often can they say that their partner has given them a sponge bath in a hotel room that didn't have an accessible bathroom? You know, like, there are absolutely all these moments that to someone that's not familiar, they might look at that and go, oh, ew.
Yeah.
Like, I could never. But when you're in love and it's normal for you, it's just a fun, silly moment, you know? Yeah.
Okay, I have to, Christina, you're going to have to just kind of hold your breath here, because I have to give away a trade secret here on the How We Got Here podcast as it relates to Richard and I, because I know Shane and Hannah are going to get it. So, my now deceased partner, very independent. I can do all this myself. Well, he, towards the end he couldn't, and toileting was one of the things that he resisted help on.
Yeah.
I can do this. I could do it. Well, so one day we just looked at each other, and I knew he was struggling. We just decided that we were going to have a name for this activity. And we decided that we were going to call these pooparamas. and he laughed, and then from there on he'd look at me and he'd say, "It's time for a pooparama." And we'd get up, he'd get his walker, we'd go, and I'm just going to be very graphic here because you guys were a little bit, he'd sit on the pot.
Yeah.
And I'd stand at the door, and sometimes I'd have to clean, sometimes I wouldn't. But you know what? Some of the most meaningful and intimate conversations the two of us ever had was during pooparamas, because how much more vulnerable can people be at these times? And folks who have not experienced that and think that they can't do it, oh my God, ooh, it's icky, oh no! You can do it when you love somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes second nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm trying to think of other examples, but another showering. Hannah has to help me do the entire shower, and I think when people think about that, they must think, wow, what a burden to Hannah. Mm-hmm. But those are some of the funnest moments that we have. We tell each other stories, talk about our day, make each other laugh. Yeah. Definitely allows for closeness and bonding.
I think that's a good launching off point too, to talk about the interplay between caregiving and intimacy, because intimacy comes in many forms in relationships, including those moments shared when you're helping someone bathe. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, if you're willing to go there with us.
Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
I mean, I think early on in our relationship, the caregiving aspect helped the intimacy aspect. I think it just brought us closer together, physically in ways that we otherwise wouldn't have been because of the caregiving. So I think in that way it really...
Because I was like, I have to pee. And I was like, well, my pants are already off. Might as well.
Oh, my God.
That's terrible. But that's Anyway, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was done. I was just saying that I think early on it really helped us, be physically intimate and close together.
Yeah. And I think that nowadays it's seamless. Yeah. Because, Hannah's helping me get ready for bed, and we're, undressing. She's helping me do that, but we're also just a couple.
Yeah.
And, we have intimacy the same way any other couple does.
Right.
So there's no hard line between the two for us. We're never being intimate and then I'm pause.
Yeah.
Time for my care.
And I think some people really assume that there is a line, and people will ask us, like, where do you draw the line? Or like, how could you still be intimate after you've helped with care? You know, all these things that it's just like, it's not two separate things. It's very much just one thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, goodness gracious, St. Ignatius.
I can tell Chris is relating.
I'm letting you run with this because this is getting close to home for me too. So
I could tell by the way you're responding that it resonates very much with your own caregiving experience.
Right. Yeah, and it's another reason why we do these podcasts and share these stories, because it's not only cathartic, it helps people who are going to be in these similar positions, because it's so important to be able to share this. And that's why I just so respect what you're doing to share this. And I'm going to kind of go back to something that I wrote down, that it just kind of, to me, told the whole story. And we just started off when you said that huge elephant in the room. Well, most people were going to say disabilities, caregiving. The huge element in the room for the two of you was the distance. I mean, if there's not authenticity and love right from that statement, then, if those negative people that don't get it on Facebook, just delete them.
I agree. I think that intimacy is definitely the area that makes the ignorant people and the trolls, for lack of a better word, most fired up. There is so much stigma about what sex is and what good sex is. We've said more times than I think we need to that we have a sexual relationship and that I'm capable of that we're capable of having children and all of that, and yet every day we get messages from people saying there's no way he satisfies you.
That's like the biggest comment that we get. It's true.
It's really weird.
Or people being like, I
that's
could,
so weird.
He couldn't. Yeah, it's really weird.
But you mentioned this before, intimacy can take on so many different forms. And all that really matters is that both of us are happy and satisfied. Yeah. And we are very, we talk about that, making sure that whatever we're doing is good for both of us. Yeah. And as long as that is true,
that's
you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
There's an old saying from an old friend of mine. He used to say, if people don't like what they see, they don't have to look.
I wish everyone that leaves a mean comment on our channel would read that quote. Read that quote.
Really think about it.
Yeah, really internalize it.
Let's take a moment for them, okay?
A moment of silence.
Yes.
Okay, very good, Christina.
That's funny.
The moment.
The moment has now passed. On to the rest of the interview. Yeah, it feels like nowadays with social media just being ubiquitous with our day-to-day lives that and particularly been amplified, I feel like, through the pandemic and the most recent presidential election. People just feel like they can share their opinions about everything all the time. I don't know if you both caught the Bo Burnham special on Netflix.
No, it's on our list.
I've been meaning to.
We love Bo
I'm sure
Burnham.
you've been traveling and been busy. Highly recommend, as I'm sure plenty of folks have recommended it to you, but there's one part of his statement where he's doing a little stand-up part. He's like, do we really need everyone to share their opinions all the time at any point in time? Do we really need that? Is there a benefit to that? And I just, it's so true. And I love Bo Burnham too.
He's great. Yeah, I think it does get, when you have an audience of our size, it can be really overwhelming having so much of that negative energy directed at you every day. But we thankfully are able to use it as motivation, because we've had plenty of examples where someone will message us hateful, terrible things. And then a few months go by, and they send us an email, and it says something like, I was really ignorant. I thought I had your relationship figured out, but now that I've watched more of it, I understand that your love is real, and that I was the closed-minded one. And that doesn't happen often, but it's those, here and there, we've converted or helped someone to be a little bit more open-minded. Yeah. And so whenever we read these horrible things, we try to remind ourselves that, like, if we can help one of them think a little bit more positively about disability, we're doing our job. So, yeah.
And I think you're looking at that positively, that you are changing people's lives by telling your story, even if it's just one person.
Yeah, another source of motivation for us is hearing from other disabled people who maybe were not able to imagine a relationship for themselves. When I was young, I really internalized the messages that society was giving me, that I was not ever going to be a valuable partner, and because of that, I didn't allow myself to kind of open up to people in that way. So I just said, no, I'm not gonna date. I'm gonna worry about other stuff. And it wasn't until later on when I met more older adults living with my disease, who had families and kids and careers and relationships, that I realized, like, oh, maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
So another reason why we love what we do, because we're able to show young people that this is possible and fun.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a whole other audience of people who are not disabled who, like me, would have no idea that ableism exists, or that wheelchairs aren't allowed on airplanes. You have to store them below. Like, all these things that people are learning from our videos that they otherwise wouldn't have experience with. In the same way that I learned about all this stuff by meeting Shane and marrying him, whatever.
And that caregiving is not overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things that you can learn from a relationship, but people that otherwise wouldn't learn them are coming in and learning them. So.
Yeah, and I want to tell you something that I recently have learned through my Healing Ties podcast. I had a fellow message me, like we were talking, it's out of the sky blue. You get these messages from people you don't know, and one of the things that I've always said through my caregiving experience is, caregiving happens because of two things: an unfortunate accident or untimely diagnosis, and suddenly you're a caregiver. I mean, those are the kind of the common. And I had a fellow, he stroked my ego. I was very happy about that. He said, I've listened to all your podcasts, and I enjoy your message. You've helped me through so many situations. But I said, there's a part that you're missing. And he said, I chose to be a caregiver because my husband is disabled. And we've had a couple of follow-up conversations. I'd love to introduce the two of you to the two of them, but what it told me was that this whole caregiving sphere is bigger than what we think, and that people are attracted to one another, irregardless of the perceived caregiving needs.
Yeah.
And the two of you are such a shining example about that, because I mentioned it earlier. It's all about love, care, and commitment, and goodness, that's what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I've been on the receiving end of care for my entire life. So there's not, I didn't have a lot of great examples of what it felt like to really provide care. I'm going to embarrass you.
Yeah, I can tell. I know where this is going already.
Right? Yeah. 2 years into our relationship, we were on a road trip together, and we were in Denver, and we partook in some legal in Denver substances that were perfectly legal in Denver. And Hannah got way higher than she ever expected to become.
Or was attempting. Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It was the altitude.
It must have been.
It must have been.
Or the fact that
well, especially if it was edibles.
it was edibles and she took
Yeah.
way too many.
Yeah.
But we were...
Like, this is how I die.
Literally. But we were an hour from our hotel when it kicked in for her.
An hour walk, yeah.
And it was so bad that she began trying to lay down and go to sleep in the restaurant
We were in a
that we were
restaurant,
in. And I was like, Hannah, we have got to get back to our hotel. Like, this cannot happen right here. And over the next, 2 hours, maybe, I kind of became Hannah's caregiver in a way. And I was responsible for getting her safely back to the hotel and into bed. And it was scary. It was hilarious. But it was scary.
Hilarious.
Yeah. And as we got back to the hotel room and Hannah fell asleep for 18 hours.
I woke. I didn't just leave you for 18 hours.
No, I know.
I woke. I helped Shane into bed. It was totally fine.
But as she fell asleep, I had this profound moment of realizing that caregiving is not a burden. I have struggled with that in my life, feeling like a burden to Hannah, to others. And in that moment, it occurred to me that I would do literally anything to make sure Hannah was safe and comfortable and doesn't die from edibles. But it was profound, even though it was a bit ridiculous. So I was like, oh, this is how Hannah feels.
Yeah.
You just do it for the people that you love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another beautiful story. So Christina, there you are.
There I am. I disappeared for a bit.
Disappeared.
My apologies, but I heard you handled my disappearance like a pro.
Well, I tried, but we missed you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I feel the love. So I'm curious, transitioning kind of to your day-to-day life. What are some examples of ways that we can improve accessibility, that you encounter day-to-day, I guess, and some of which you've documented on your YouTube?
Yeah. There's a lot, so we're just going to spout them off here.
Well, I can start with my most passionate plea.
Go for it.
Go
for it.
It's
that's the top of the scroll.
Yes, the top, the number one. I think, for us, we travel a lot for speaking engagements or conferences, whatever, for our work, and
or we used to.
We used to. Yeah, in typical times we're traveling a lot, and wheelchairs not being allowed on airplanes. Besides in the cargo hold is so unbelievably difficult. And when, before I knew Shane, I had just assumed that if you used a wheelchair, you could stay in it on the airplane.
Yeah.
And that is not true at all. So it's extremely difficult to, have Shane seated comfortably on an airplane seat. We have a kid's car seat that we've kind of retrofitted. But just the fact of
comfortable or safe.
No. And, just having to transfer out of your wheelchair, people having the airline employees help them transfer. It's just not safe. It's not,
And the wheelchairs break.
Yeah, that's a whole nother point. It's the wheelchairs break. It's 26 a day that break. So I think that's my most passionate, accessibility issue is the lack of accessible airline travel.
Yeah, I would say another really big one is related to caregiving, and it's improving the systems that provide caregivers for people that need them.
Yeah.
Hannah and I are very fortunate that right now she's able to provide my daily care and wants to provide my daily care. But if she ever couldn't or didn't want to, the processes by which I would go about getting a caregiver are wildly expensive, wildly difficult, and would make it really hard for us to continue our life the way it is right now.
I mean, we've added it up, and it's like $60,000 a year, out of pocket for caregivers. So just, it's pretty inaccessible for a lot of people.
And if you want to take it a step further, it's a complicated issue, obviously, but, in order to not pay those $60,000 a year, we essentially need to have no income and no assets.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys know all this, but
spending down to qualify for Medicaid.
Exactly. It's something that we had to talk about whether we should actually get married or fake it. Because we were worried about, if we ever needed caregivers, would Hannah's income negatively affect me? There's a lot that you have to figure out, and it's not fair, and it puts a very unfair burden on disabled people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What else?
So powerful.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot at caregiving.com. We've been talking a lot about caregiver compensation this year. There's so many facets to providing proper caregiving support, and that's a big one. Is making care more accessible, and it's inhumane to think that that's the system that we have in place right now. That a couple would have to make that decision together, or a parent and a child. Spending down a parent's assets just so they qualify for Medicaid. And that's basically the only option.
And we have a bunch of friends that live on their own and rely on caregiving to, that's their hired caregivers are their sole caregiving. And the shit that they go through. Am I allowed to say that word?
You've got protection and permission.
I don't know about protection, but permission, yes.
Protection. The shit that they go through every week, literally every week, I see at least one of my friends talking about how a caregiver didn't show up, or showed up sick, or, left their food in a place that they couldn't reach it. And you almost can't fault the caregivers because they're being paid $12 an hour, and you get what you pay for. It's the systems that need to be fixed so that real qualified people who are passionate about caregiving will take those jobs and be able to support themselves doing them.
Yeah, and a lot of those people, a lot of our friends only get 2 hours of caregiving a day, which isn't enough for them. And then they don't have a relationship with the caregivers. These people are coming by for an hour a day, once a week on their shift. And they don't know where to put the food because they don't know this person. So it's just a difficult system for everyone.
That's the truth. Goodness.
The system.
The system.
We have to fix the system.
This is where we insert ominous music.
We have to fix the system. And that's what we're doing by advocating. Telling the stories. You can have all the statistics you want, but if there's not stories behind the statistics, they don't mean anything.
Every day we get comments that are like, why don't you just hire caregivers? People don't know, and they have no reason to. Until you're facing it, why would you look into caregiving regulations? But people have no idea that we literally could not hire caregivers and still pay the bills. Just not possible.
Yeah.
I am curious on that note, what planning for the future does look like for the two of you right now, especially as it relates to that. I don't know if you have any answers, but
yeah,
a little bit.
I think we've talked about how we'll need help of some kind when we have kids, and we recently moved into a house with my parents. We both sold Shane and I lived in a house, and my parents lived in a house, and we both sold our houses and bought a bigger house together. And that was partially in preparation for having kids, partially just because we really like my parents and thought it was a good idea. And for having kids, it'll be nice to have them around, to have support that's easier, instead of hiring a babysitter every night or whatever. But I think we have talked about when we have kids, like it would be easier to get a nanny or a babysitter to help with the kids and I help with Shane, or if we can hire someone for just a couple hours a day, like, instead of hiring like a full-time caregiver. So I think we've definitely talked about like different ways that we can make it work and, make sure that everyone is supported.
And to get back to like the unfair regulations, like we've gone so far as meeting with accountants and lawyers to talk about, because we're successful in YouTube and writing, so we're making income. And we've met with professionals to talk about like what it would look like to take all of it out of my name so that I could theoretically qualify if I ever needed to.
Yeah.
It's
not possible.
It's not really possible, at least without doing some shady stuff. But we've had those conversations because we do want to have kids like sooner rather than later. We haven't like put a date on it, but we both want kids, and we have to figure out how we're going to make it good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you guys have a good
sharing.
plan. Well, goodness, we've just covered so much wonderful information, stories. But is there anything else that we've kind of left out that you might like to mention? Or goodness, we have peeled the onion here.
That's why my eyes are burning.
I would just challenge people to question their assumptions as they relate to disability.
Yeah.
We all have a lot of, what we think is good info about what it must be like based on what the media has told us, and very rarely is that accurate. So if you're looking to be more informed and educated about disability and caregiving, follow disabled people, learn from them and listen to them, and question the assumptions that you have.
Nice.
There we go.
Yeah, a little bow tie. Yeah.
A little bow tie. There you go.
Well, I was also going to ask as a final question if there's any fundraising you're doing right now. I know we're coming off of Spinal Muscular Atrophy Pride Month, yes. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about that too before we let you go.
Thank you. My nonprofit organization is called Laughing at My Nightmare, Inc., and we provide medical and adaptive equipment to people that live with muscular dystrophy. Thanks to our amazing supporters, we've been able to give a little over $500,000 in equipment in the last few years. We're always fundraising, as a nonprofit organization. So if you would like to help out with our mission, you can head over to laughingatmynightmare.com and check out what we do. Thank you.
Great.
Laughingatmynightmare.com. Wow. The two of you, it is a true honor to visit with the two of you today.
Thank you. We've had fun.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
So,
I
Christina.
appreciate it. And yes?
It's pretty awesome. Off the charts.
Always off the charts. I think it just really speaks so highly of who we are as hosts, quite honestly. Just kidding. It's all about the guests.
It's all about the guest.
You're a wonderful host. We appreciate your thoughtfulness.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And
you can give us 5 stars on Yelp.
5 stars on Yelp. Oh, my goodness gracious, St. Ignatius, that's too much. So, How We Got Here is produced and edited by Bill Oddmund of Oddbox Productions.
Social media is by me, Christina Best, and the designs are by Michelle Lacouture.
And How We Got Here is production of Caregiving.com and the Whole Care Network, and is sponsored by Anthem.
We are on social media at _HWGH pod on both Instagram and Twitter. And I realized that we didn't get the social media handles for Shane and Hannah. So if you want to share those now, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, you can follow us on YouTube at Squirmy and Grubs. You can follow us on Instagram Do you want to give your handle?
Mine is Hannah Ale, A-Y-L. It's kind of hard to, yeah.
And mine is Shane Burcaw.
Much easier.
First and last name. Super creative.
And we'll be back for another episode next Tuesday. Until then, thanks so much for listening.